You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Justice is Served. Today, another deadly shooting in the South, this time in Mississippi. A mad professor or gun control problem. Next, the prison seamstress Joyce Mitchell says, "I'm not a monster, I was just depressed." But will that buy her a better sentence? Then, Black widow teen Michelle Carter is charged with manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, for encouraging her boyfriend's suicide. But will those charges in fact stick? And lastly, Damon Wayans writes off the Cosby rape allegations to being a money hustle and in fact calls the accusers unrapeable. Is this a skit or is he for real? We will discuss on Justice is Served. My name is Sara Azari, and I'm your host of Justice is Served, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Chelsea Galicia.
Hi there.
Hey, Chelsea. All right, let's get going, get the show on the road with our most recent news, which broke out on Monday, of another gun violence instance of campus shooting, this time in Mississippi, at the Delta University, where Professor Schmidt was shot and killed in his office by suspect Shannon Lamb, who had earlier in the day apparently shot and killed his live-in girlfriend, and very, very tragic story. The motive apparently is unknown, although I want to talk to Chelsea about that. And there was an all-day manhunt for Shannon Lamb, and when the police finally caught up to him, he shot himself and committed suicide. So this is now, in terms of gun violence, this is a double homicide ending in a suicide, and these lives are taken. And it seems like every other day we're talking about a similar incident in a theater, in a university, and I don't know, in a school, in a church. Exactly. So one of the things I think that's interesting, immediately people started talking about, well, maybe there was a love triangle between the professor and the live-in girlfriend. And do you know anything about motive here, or what might have been?
I didn't find anything. I didn't find anything. I mean, that's a fun, juicy story, but regardless of why he did it, the fact is that he did it, and this case will sort of be shut and closed, open and closed, because he's killed himself.
Right.
But is that really the kind of justice that we want in our society? As long as the gunman kills himself, that's just the end of the story? Well,
no, it's not the end of the story, because we have a serious gun problem in the U.S., and we've talked about this so much. And, there's also reports about this guy, maybe he was mentally ill because he took a medical leave. Well, not every medical leave has to do with mental illness, first of all. And even if it did, we go back to the discussion you and I had a couple weeks ago, I think with BJ when he was here, where we talked about, how is the university supposed to make the campus safe when they have no knowledge that one of their professors is mentally ill? Let's say his medical leave was related to a hernia or something.
Right.
How's the university supposed to know that this guy might erratically just one day pick up a gun and come and kill another professor? What's your take on campus security when it comes to this type of incident?
I mean, it's just the same as every other public place, where we either have to have everyone carrying guns, which I don't personally want
right.
that. Or metal detectors every single place, like every place we go to. Can you imagine having to take your shoes off, getting into the movie theater like you do at the airport?
Or trying to get to class at a university.
Right. So is that really how we want to live? And that is the question. And I don't want to be accused of being anti-Second Amendment. I am for the Second Amendment, but I'm for the real Second Amendment, the whole thing, including the well-regulated part. And I don't know, I mean, these are tragic, but maybe, I don't know how many of these have to happen before people start saying, all right, enough of it is enough. The NRA cannot control what happens to the safety of every American because we're all subject to this gun violence at any moment.
But I also think that when I say we need stricter access to guns, we need stricter gun control laws, I also think that it's more than just the legislation. It needs to be a fundamental change in sort of societal perspective around guns. It's those people under the Second Amendment who want to exercise their constitutional right to bear arms. They need to sacrifice that right for the safety, the general safety that we all need, because lives are being spared. Because here's the deal. If you're a mother and you're a single mother, you legitimately want to protect yourself, you want to exercise your constitutional right, you get a gun, you don't have any felonies, you qualify to get a gun, you go through the background test, you are not mentally, unsound, you go through all these checks, and you lock that gun, and somehow your mentally ill cousin comes and breaks in and takes this gun. I mean, there's only so much you can control the access by way of legislation even. So I think that it's more of just a general change in perspective of Americans that, yes, you do have this constitutional right, but it has become a problem. And
I don't think that there's any sacrifice involved. I think the wording of the Second Amendment, regulated, not even just regulated, well regulated.
No, but I'm saying that even if it's well regulated, there's still that risk of somebody coming in and getting access to the gun.
But I think it will reduce the numbers.
Absolutely will reduce it. Absolutely will reduce it, yes.
So we can't prevent everything, but I think that going in that direction to prevent some of the deaths, I mean, if that's not the government's job to prevent some wrongful deaths, I'm not sure what is, right?
Right.
So...
But again, I think in this case specifically, to blame it on mental illness is you're missing the entire point. It's a complete cop-out because we don't even know if this guy was mentally ill. He was actually, considered the cool professor, the one who played the guitar. Everybody wanted to be like him. Yeah, he had some little, quirks, but he's a professor. Anyway, all right. Well, we want to hear from you.
Okay.
We want to hear your views about gun access, gun control, how that relates to mental illness. Please do tweet us. I can be tweeted at Azari Law and Chelsea at Chelsea Galicia. And moving on to our second case that we'd like to discuss is that Joyce Mitchell, whom we've talked about at length here, the prison seamstress who was behind the escape of the two felons in New York, upstate New York, is now facing sentencing on September 28th. She gave a very interesting interview on the Today Show to Matt Lauer and claimed, it was interesting to me, she sort of brushed her conduct under just swept it under the rug a little bit, minimized the conduct. She seems like a very unsophisticated person, but she talked about bringing in brownies and cookies for these inmates. And then she was asked, well, what about the star-shaped drill bits that you brought in? How about those? Did they raise a red flag? Like maybe, why do they want those? I have to say, Chelsea, I thought, well, what? Like, is he going to use it in arts and crafts and make cookies and holiday cards?
That part was very odd. And I do agree that she appears naive, unsophisticated. But I think that she seemed to take some responsibility. She said, I was wrong. I should be punished. It seems that the reason for this interview is she just wants people to not view her as a monster. It didn't seem that she was trying to say that point the blame somewhere else.
No.
That she should not be punished.
She struck me as, we've all had those relationships with bad guys that later we regret, and these are really bad guys. Speaking of bad guys, right? I had no idea. They're high security, and so murderers. We've all had these things we've done that we don't even want to talk about it. We don't even want to be reminded of it, let alone interviewed for it on the Today Show. So of course, there was a little bit of that. She's unsophisticated. She's probably insecure. They gave her attention. It felt good. She got involved, and then she just sort of got stuck and just got sucked into it.
Well, she said that she at some point became scared that they threatened her husband's life, who also worked there.
And that's exactly what doesn't make sense. There's a lot of holes in her story. In that, I don't think she's a bad person. I don't think she's a monster. I don't think she's blaming anyone else. She's taking responsibility. But she's minimizing her, the fact that she says I brought in cookies and brownies, but she leaves out the drill bits, the Starship drill bits.
She acknowledged that.
Well, Matt Lauer had to bring it up and he had to say, well
she had been prepared. She was good at just answering the question the way that I prepare my clients for a deposition and not to elaborate and include anything else. So she waited for him to bring it up. So I won't hold that against her. And he was like, well, what, didn't that raise a red flag? I mean, that was the funniest part of the interview. She didn't explain why she thought she was being asked for them, because they only told her what they were for after she had given those things to them.
I'm sorry, but I understand. When you're in prison for a long time, you develop a relationship with the guards, the arts and crafts teachers, the people that you come in contact with on a daily basis. It's hard not to. And even though there's rules set that you're not supposed to cross these lines and you're supposed to keep, because inmates will manipulate you, they want to get out, they want to get perks, and you got to watch yourself. You got a weak person like her. She's probably having marital problems.
She did say she felt like her husband didn't love her anymore, which is not an excuse, but it gives you a sense of it was just naive. It wasn't monstrous.
Exactly. But the bottom line is she's still sort of, in my opinion, played it a little bit, and I'm not blaming her for it, but to me it sounded like that bad guy that you dated that you just don't want to talk about, and you're minimizing it. You just, it's not comfortable. I can't blame her for it.
The part that seemed bizarre, and which was not included in the segment of the interview that aired, because there's the rest of that interview is going to be aired later this week on another program, but apparently there was a part about how it did turn sexual. She denied sex.
To me, that's irrelevant. To me, I mean, whether she did or didn't have sex, she assisted in their escape. She was the reason why they were able to. And I think there were other prison. I absolutely think other prison employees.
She's trying to claim that none of the acts, which include oral sex, were consensual. That she was frightened into them.
Right,
but there was nobody that she could tell, like, hey, this
you're blaming the dead inmate. Number one, he's a felon, so his credibility's at issue. Number two, he's dead. So. And frankly, who cares if he forced your head on a penis or you went down there voluntarily? To me, at this point, that's not what matters. What matters is that she really violated the law and assisted in two guys leaving the prison. And her story has holes in it, because when she says she acted in fear for her husband's safety,
that to me,
it doesn't make sense, because then she says that the reason she had the change of heart when she was going to go pick them up when they got out of the prison was because they said they were going to kill her husband. And to me, that contradicts the earlier statement, because it's like, if they're going to go kill your husband and you're actually going to go pick him up and help him do that, and that sounds like a reward in exchange for you giving him the tools to escape. That doesn't sound... So her story doesn't match up. Again, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's really unsophisticated, and she's a woman who needed the attention from the wrong people, and she certainly got it. And now she's claiming, kind of, that she's mentally ill, right?
I didn't hear that.
Well, she says she's depressed. And she did it because she was in fear. That's one thing, but she's also depressed.
Maybe because in my mind, mental illness is not one and the same with depression. I think of mental illness as like James Holmes shooting up a
no,
theater.
And I'm not talking about legal sanity. I'm talking about any kind of mental health issue. And depression is a form of mental illness. And she's saying that she was severely depressed. And what I have, as a defense attorney, what I have to say to that is that at sentencing, a judge will absolutely consider mitigating factors and aggravating factors. So the aggravating factors here that I would assume the prosecutor is going to raise is that these are two dangerous felons that she assisted. She brought in tools. I mean, she really went overboard. And there's probably other prison employees that she colluded with. How she got
them in? By burying them in frozen meat?
Hamburger meat, yeah.
She really thought about this.
Yeah, she used some sophisticated means to commit this crime. So those are aggravating factors. And then they look at the defense, the judge will look at the defense and say, okay, well, why would this person do this? And I think what she has going for her is that she's an older lady with, I would assume, no criminal history, or minimal, if any. She's working in a prison, so I assume it's no criminal history. That, she's maybe goes to church, she has a family, she's married, she has kids. These are all mitigating factors. And if, in fact, she's depressed, I think she needs to walk into the sentencing with documentation. I mean, you and I can wake up one day with the blues and say, we're depressed, just like not clinically, but just figuratively. And I think she needs to prove that she has some diagnosis, if in fact that's going to be taken into consideration, because she's facing up to 7 years.
Yeah, I don't think that there is much of a way to. I think she's going to get the full sentence. I think she's perhaps won some people over in the public to reduce this idea that we have of her as some malicious, crazy woman who is having sex with felons and then helping them escape. But in the eyes of the law, I don't think that there's going to be any way that this will ultimately be mitigated, and she'll serve. She'll be sentenced to the full thing. I don't know if she'll serve the full sentence.
Sex in the prison really, I just don't see that as being relevant, because what we see in movies with prison guards having sex with inmates, it's true. It happens. And and inmates with other inmates. And I don't think that's as I don't think that's what she's going to go away for, really. I think it's that she let these guys out.
Of course, it's not in our mind, in the minds of the public. We had some idea of her. I know I did. Somebody who was having sexual relationships with felons and then helping them escape. I mean, my idea of her.
And they get brownies for it. I mean, how great is that? Talk about perks. Sex with perks in prison.
Right.
All right.
So what I'm saying is that it changed my personal idea of her, but it didn't change what I think should happen to her legally.
In terms of a sentencing, yes.
So I think she'll be sentenced to the full thing, but probably for good behavior will get out half the time.
Well, yeah, that's always the case if it's a non-violent crime, which technically, even though she let violent felons out, it is a non-violent crime. She'll do part of her time. But even on the 7-year sentence, I think she's not going to get the full 7 years. I think she's going to get something mid-range, and then she'll do a percentage of that, obviously.
I want to know who's going to reimburse the government for all the resources that it costs to put out the manhunt. That's what I would. I'm sure
maybe
the
she'll write a
taxpayers of
book,
New York,
or maybe she'll write a book, and then the prosecution will take some of that money and pay the government back.
That's a good idea of what to do with her time.
Tweet us, please, and let us know what you think about should happen to Joyce Mitchell come September 28th at her sentencing. What do you think is a fair sentence for her, and what do you think the judge should consider in sentencing her? You can tweet Chelsea at Chelsea Galicia and me at Azari Law. All right, just a quick announcement before I turn it over to Chelsea for the second half of the show, and I'm going to talk about football. Last football season, Draftkings.com crowned more millionaires than any other one-week fantasy sports site anywhere. And this season, the prizes are even bigger. So you could start the season by winning $2 million. It's the biggest fantasy football contest ever, you guys. Okay, $10 million in prizes are up for grabs, including $2 million for first place and $1 million for second place. One-week fantasy means no season-long commitments. So in other words, you can play where you want, when you want, with the players of your choice. You've never experienced football like this one. Just pick your players, pile up the points, and pick up your cash, and that's all you need to do. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is Draftkings. Welcome to the big time. All right, so hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code BLACK, BLACK, to play free for a shot at the $2 million top prize. Again, enter BLACK, BLACK, for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com. Thank you.
All right.
Turn it over to Chelsea.
Okay, thank you. So this is a sad case all around. So we're talking about the case of Michelle Carter, who was 17 years old when she had a long-distance boyfriend who was 18 years old, who had a history of depression and a suicide attempt, who ultimately did kill himself. And right before or along the way, she, the 17-year-old girlfriend, encouraged him continuously to go through with the suicide, even up in the moments right before he succeeded in doing it. He did it by carbon monoxide poisoning in a car. At one point, he had begun to get poisoned, and then he jumped out of the car and called her, and she was basically said, "What are you doing? Get back in there." I'm not sure if actually it was a call or a text message, but basically she said, "Get back in there, go through with this. Don't live like this anymore. You're going to be free and happy when you die." And so he did. He got back in the car and he died. So now she is on trial for involuntary manslaughter. And
has the trial begun? I don't think so. I think she's just charged with involuntary manslaughter.
All right. So
yeah.
I wonder if it'll actually
go. But she is going to go to trial. I think she's going to go to trial.
Yeah, I do too. Here's the thing: is maybe I've been spending too much time with my co-host now, where I see this entirely through the eyes of a defense attorney. Involuntary manslaughter, when I think of that, I usually think of things like drunk driving that kills somebody, something where you are doing something that you have sort of a right to do, but it can be done in a dangerous fashion, driving recklessly, driving drunk, and then you take somebody else's life.
Some type of conduct.
Without your intending to do so.
Right.
So in this case, she did not participate in the actual gathering of the things that he used to kill himself, but she encouraged him to do it, although she would say that at some point she did try and tell him to get help, and he just said, it's too late for me.
Get help from her mental health facility where she was getting help. That was a nice...
Right, yeah. And we can't even, I don't say... Legally, we can't fault her. Maybe on a personally, we want to fault her for not going to parents, teachers, police, and saying something. But the truth is, she doesn't actually have a duty to do that. She's not a mental health professional. She's not a doctor. She's not a police officer. She's not a teacher who has to report things where a child might hurt themselves or somebody else. So I don't see where she acted criminally. Now, if we had, let's say, bullying, harassment, texting laws, maybe this could be a form of that. But involuntary manslaughter is just way too far out there, I think, for this to stand a chance. I'm wondering, do you think that there's any charge that she could be convicted of?
Well, I think I have two things to say about this case. One is the legal charge and what she's facing legally, and then just my opinion of her in general. Legally speaking, the only appropriate charge is involuntary manslaughter, although I think it's going to be a huge challenge for the prosecution to prove their case. And the reason is, the defense is claiming this is First Amendment speech, it's protected speech. There is an exception under the First Amendment under Brandenburg versus Ohio, which I'm sure you remember from law school. It's the incitement exception, which means that if, however, you're inciting someone to engage in unlawful activities, such as taking away their life, then that's an exception to your speech, and it's not protected speech. Right. So I have an issue with what the defense attorney is saying in terms of the First Amendment argument. But aside from that, in terms of involuntary manslaughter, yes, involuntary manslaughter is the negligent, unintentional, I should say, killing of another human being where you don't need to have malice aforethought like you would for murder. And so a classic and most recent example of it would be Dr. Conrad Murray, who was found guilty of the death of Michael Jackson because he left him unattended on an IV of propofol and was talking to his girlfriend, doing all kinds of things, and Michael Jackson died in his care. So, he didn't intend for Michael Jackson to die, but he died. And so he got the maximum sentence in California, which was 4 years for involuntary manslaughter. Another example that's closer factually to this case would be Dr. Kevorkian, who was doing assisted suicides. She's not, like Chelsea said, she's not physically assisting this guy to take his own life, but it is really, and this is where I go into my personal opinion of her, and I consider her a black widow. This is where, she's really gone overboard. She taunts this guy. She badgers the guy. It was horrifying when I read these text messages because she doesn't even let him for a minute come. The minute he wants to come off the topic, she brings him right back on track, on suicide track. And it's almost like, there's a disorder called Munchausen by proxy syndrome, where the parent or the caregiver fakes an illness in the child. It's also called medical abuse syndrome, medical abuse syndrome. And even though the age difference between these two is not like a caregiver and a child, she has this sort of authority over him. It seems like from the text that she is his go-to person, and she just keeps pushing him. She's determined in his pursuit and her pursuit of him, and it's horrifying that she wants this guy absolutely to do this. Even in the moments where he's changing his mind, like right when he got out of the car, she's like, get back in the car and finish this. And so this should be a crime. This should be a crime.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I I'm a defense attorney, and I obviously my job is to defend people, including her. But this
Well,
is
you've
so,
not been hired by her, but people like her.
yeah, but I mean, people like her, but I mean, I'm really horrified by these set of facts, and I feel like, and you know what, she did it all for attention, just like in Munchausen by proxy. You do it for medical attention and sympathy, and you do it to sort of be able to deceive the medical community about the illness of your child. For the same reason, she wants the attention of her friends and family. She goes right on Twitter and talks about what a beautiful life and light she lost. 4 months later, happy birthday, I miss you so much. You know, has a fundraiser for suicide prevention. She is dying. It's all about her. She wants all this attention, and to me, this is so disgusting and sadist and beyond.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
absolutely should be. And I think if there was ever a law against like social media bullying, text message bullying, that this should be a form of bullying, even though they were in a romantic
They
relationship.
hardly saw each other, though. You know?
Right, but their relationship was that of boyfriend girlfriend,
Sure.
so it's not in the traditional sense like a bully, some buddy from
Boyfriend,
school.
girlfriend, and almost like she was his confidant. She was his everything, and that he would text her all the time. And she was like, "Do this, why don't you do this?" And she would almost like emasculate him. You know, like, "What do you mean you didn't do this? You said you were going to do. You promised to do
Well,
this."
if that was against the law, a lot of women would be sitting in jail. So I don't know if we should criminalize that.
Maybe we shouldn't go there.
But definitely something that would amount to, I mean, this amounts to civilly
funny.
intentional infliction of emotional distress, right?
Right.
Is there a criminal equivalent to that? She can't let that one go. I think somebody's guilty here of emasculating men. I better stop right now. She's about to cry her makeup off.
All right. Next story. Why don't you tweet us and tell us what you think about?
If women emasculating men should be a crime, that's our story. She's going to get it together, but before that, actually, here's another funny story. This one is only funny because I can't take this guy seriously. Damon Wayans goes on a radio show and claims that the rape allegations against Bill Cosby are basically a hoax, a money hustle by unrapeable women.
That's a new vocabulary word.
Right. And even when one of the co-hosts on that radio show goes, "Hey, dude, this happened a long time ago. Maybe they were hot when they were young." And he's like, they were never hot enough to rape. No. And so
I love that word, though. Unrapeable. It's like, I would never say that to a prosecutor because I could never get what I want. But unrapeable, it's like, I just love that that's a word now.
I can't believe that.
All right, anyway, go
either.
ahead.
So I was looking to see whether he had any logic, any knowledge of any facts in saying this thing. So I listened to the interview, and within, I don't know, 2 minutes, I already cannot take this guy seriously at all.
Right.
Maybe it's why he was good at In Living Color, but he has
He's
no
hysterical.
credibility. Yeah. So the very beginning, he was of this interview, he was asked about why he stopped performing. Apparently, he had a complication with his diabetes, and one of the co-hosts asked him, "What's diabetes?" And he says, "Well, my understanding or my belief is that it's a circulation problem, and it happens if you don't move." So in my mind, I'm thinking, so does he think if you like get up and do the hokey pokey that you can move around and that'll create the circulation in your feet that you need in order to overcome diabetes? No, that's not even close. Diabetes is a sugar problem.
Right.
And it was funny. He says, "Well, I eat paleo now, so I don't have any sugar. All I eat are vegetables and protein." Well, sorry, dude, but vegetables are actually sugar, but they're good sugar because they got other things with them,
Fiber, et cetera, yeah.
So you can't say I don't eat sugar and then say I eat vegetables. It's just
Well,
he's
but
very
he's not-
misinformed. So
yeah.
he's got no logic and very little. I don't know, intelligence about something. I mean, if I had diabetes, I would try and become like an expert on diabetes and to try and educate myself and the public. But for him to say something so ludicrous, I couldn't take him seriously for anything he said after that. It is clear he has not read any of the allegations, heard any of the stories. He just kind of dismisses the whole thing. So
Well,
I
it's
don't think he
interesting.
should be.
He has some good advice for Bill Cosby. He says, "Why don't you divorce your wife?" Wink, wink.
Well, I don't
Give
get
her
that.
all the money so that you're judgment proof, and then go do these depositions and tell the truth. And tell the truth, by the way, means that you really had legitimate relationships with all 51 women. Here's what I have to say about this. You know, I defend a lot of sexual assault cases, and I'm very, very skeptical about what victims have to say. 9 out of 10 times I'm able to prove that they're lying. But, in a court of public opinion, not in a court of law, these women don't have relationships with one another. There's no evidence of collusion, that they got together and came up with stories. Their stories are all really pretty much the same, of drugging and being raped, and there are 51 of them. And meanwhile, Bill Cosby has done nothing to cross-examine them aggressively and prove that they're lying. He just once in a while sends messages through his legal team that it's not true. But he himself has sat back silently. So from a public opinion perspective, I have to say that I think he's responsible for these acts. At least most of these acts he's responsible for. Damon Wayans, however, he's entitled to his opinion. He is a comedian. I happen to like him. I like the unfiltered sense of humor that he has. I think there's only a few comedians we've seen who have that sort of raw, unfiltered, and they just say whatever they think, and they should be allowed to say whatever they think. I mean, I think he was dead serious, but I think it was funny as hell. I mean, unrapeable to me, I was just dying right here, hysterically.
Unless you're one of those 50 women. That's
no, but
so
he did
offensive.
Actually, of course, and I think it's very crude and offensive, and he did say, oh, by the way, if you truly were a victim of sexual assault, my heart goes out to you. I just don't believe these women. He said
maybe
also,
some of them are.
And by the way, on the unrapeable note, rape is not a crime about sex. It's a crime of violence. It's a crime of force and power, and it's not about being attractive. The ugliest woman can be raped and is raped, and so that was a little like, all right. I mean, it's funny, but in reality, it doesn't matter what they look like. And he also had a point, that back in the day, these drugs were the feel-good, get in the mood kind of thing. People would, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? The 60s, the 70s.
Oh, well, we can say that about any era.
No, but I mean, he's saying, look, you want it, he's saying I mean, I'm not even going to repeat the words he uses, but he basically says, you bitches wanted to take these drugs and have a good time, and you had a relationship with them.
This is why I'm saying he didn't read any of the stories, because most of the women...
even if he did, he's entitled to not believe them. You and I are entitled to believe them we come from a different perspective, maybe our ability to analyze, what people say.
But that's my thing, is that he has done no analysis. He hasn't looked at the story. From what I can tell, he really hasn't looked at this. He just has probably looked very superficially at this and just come out with this defense of Bill Cosby.
Yeah, he's still entitled to his opinion, and I think that he's not coming out and saying, look, I'm a legal expert, and this is how I break it down.
I'm more offended by what he said about diabetes. That's more dangerous. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people affected by diabetes, and people are thinking that if you just do a little shake here, move, it's a circulation problem. I mean, that is what was more offensive to me than what he thinks about Bill Cosby. But yes, he's entitled to his opinion.
And by the way, as a defendant, you're under attack by everyone. I always tell my clients, look, I'm your only friend. We're a team, and I'm your only friend, because nobody's really looking after you in this equation. And you got to think that Bill Cosby has been, under attack for several months by the women, by Gloria Allred, by the media.
But where is that Gloria Allred deposition? Are we going to be able to see that anytime soon? Because it was supposed to happen by the end of this month, I thought.
Yeah, and so he's been under attack. So maybe Wayans is just going, okay, let me be the one guy who's going to stand up as a celebrity.
That's giving him way too much credit.
No, but as a celebrity too, I think it's understandable where you say, women always try to come after you because of your money. So
then he said he was asked if this ever happened to him, and he said no.
Right.
So it's not just everybody who has money is accused of rape because he's got money. It hasn't happened to him.
Right.
So I don't think he thought that critically.
All right, so we are curious what your thoughts are about Wayans' comments on Bill Cosby. Was it offensive to you? Do you think that he's entitled to this opinion? What do you think about a comedian's right to voice this? Of course, he's been attacked on Twitter and social media, but that's what he's asked for. You say something like this, you're going to be under fire. But what are your thoughts on generally on this statement and the ability, so the freedom of speech when it comes to specifically a comedian and his sense of humor? What are your thoughts on that? So tweet at Chelsea Galicia or at Azari law. And that brings us to the close of today's episode of Justice is Served. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. I will not be here. Chelsea and BJ will be holding down the fort, but we look forward to seeing you right here next week on Justice is Served. Thank you.
From executives Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.